Growing up in a small town, you end up having to make some of your own fun and entertainment. For me, that was reading books like Michael McDowell's The Amulet and Cold Moon over Babylon. Hello and welcome. My name is Elaine, and today I'm going to be chatting about the author, Michael McDowell. He was definitely one of my favorite horror novelists back in 1979 when The Amulet was first published. Yes, I read it not long after. And according to the publications that I now have, thanks to Valancourt Books, who have now begun to publish his works again, on the cover of The Amulet, we have a quote by Stephen King, "The finest writer of paperback originals in America today." On Cold Moon over Babylon, the quote is by Peter Straub, "One of the best writers of horror in this country." And I also read Peter Straub and Stephen King during that same time period. Yes, I read Carrie shortly after it was published in, I believe it was 1976. And I also read the work Ghost Story that was produced by Stephen King and Peter Straub, both excellent authors as well. But Michael McDowell, I learned a lot of interesting facts about him. In both The Amulet and Cold Moon over Babylon, in the front, we have a summary of Michael McDowell and his works. In The Amulet, there is a special introduction by Poppy Z. Bright. That was from May 2013. Also of note, Poppy Z. Bright is now known as Billy Martin, and they are also an author of a variety of works. There were a number of interesting things that I learned about Michael McDowell. As I say, I'd read him back when his works were being first published. So The Amulet was recommended to me by a friend, and I very much enjoyed. When Cold Moon over Babylon came out, I definitely had to have that and read it as well. My public library had 4 of the Blackwater series. Unfortunately, that series went to 6, and I never finished it. I understand that now that is available as a 1-volume series instead of 6 smaller books, and I have yet to read The Elementals. Let me know if you've read any of those down in the comments below. As far as the author himself, these are things that I certainly didn't know back then. I was very happy to find out about them now, and he certainly was an amazing individual. So Michael McDowell grew up in southeast Alabama near the Florida border. He went to Harvard, where he finished with a master's degree in English. He went on to earn his PhD in English from Brandeis, and he made his home in New England thereafter. Poppy described his style of horror writing as different from other authors, where things kind of start a bit slow and then progressively get worse. In Michael's novels, things start bad and they just get way worse throughout the novel. If you've ever read The Amulet or Cold Moon over Babylon, that definitely is an accurate description. When Michael completed his studies, earned his PhD, his plan was to go on and be a teacher. However, he also loved writing, and he decided that the energy required to teach and to be a novelist was the same, so that he couldn't do both and give it his all. So he made the decision to become a writer. As I read that, for me it brought to mind The Magic of Believing by Claude M. Bristol. a book that I have covered in my channel before, and it talks about knowing when you have a goal, you do other things, you get the good enough for now job, and keep pursuing your interest and desire. I also wonder if perhaps Michael McDowell may have come across this book, because the magic of believing, unlike a lot of these law of attraction books now, the magic of believing was published in 1948. TNT It Rocks the Earth was published in 1933. Thanks to Jeremy P. Tarcher and Penguin Publications, my copy is from 2015. So definitely work that has continued to pass the test of time. And as I say, thanks to Valancourt Books, we again have Michael McDowell's works available, because unfortunately they had been out of print for a while. When Michael made the decision to focus on his writing, instead of going into the field of teaching, he became a secretary, and that's how he made his money during the day. And he would spend his evenings writing his novels. Over time, he had written 6 novels and several screenplays. Unfortunately, none of them sold. The turning point for him was watching a trailer of The Omen, a book and movie that I also enjoyed, yes, when they came out. And I remember Damien and all the creepy things that happened. So if you're looking for a good scare with evil children, The Omen is definitely a good read. It's a bit funny, as I've been planning to read that again for a few months, and suddenly here it is mentioned in Michael McDowell's introduction, another book that I've enjoyed revisiting from my past. For me, The Omen was a great read and watch, a good little break into the world of horror. For Michael McDowell, it was the turning point from writing novels and not being published to hitting on something that worked for him and then beginning to write, and that resulted in The Amulet. As I said, the turning point for him was The Omen. One night at the movies, he saw a trailer for The Omen and was inspired not by the trailer itself, but by the idea that possessed children in horror stories always seem to have suitably evil monikers like Damien and Reagan. I thought, well, isn't it convenient that these possessed children have such diabolical names? What if you had a possessed child called Fred? And I went home and tried to work out a plot and then started to write. So we moved on from there. His plan was to write something that was gory, creative murder. He knew The Amulet would pass from person to person. He just had to figure out how. He also spent an evening with a friend of his, and their evening was, how do you kill people with things in your home? He wrote all the ideas down they came up with, and that's how he developed what happens throughout The Amulet. I guess it's a good thing he had a friend who could do something like that with him. Another factor in the story, of course, is tales of cursed objects are surely as old as the horror genre itself. But McDowell puts an unusual twist on this old trope by never providing or even strongly suggesting much of an explanation for the origin of the evil amulet. The tale's antagonist, a loathsome woman named Jo Howell, may have inherited or stolen it from the cousin who raised her, but it almost seems a pure physical manifestation of Jo's anger, bitterness, and jealousy toward the town of Pinecone. which she sees as having conspired to destroy her son. I've mentioned before, we don't actually find out in the story, and it's mentioned here in the introduction, so no spoiler. For me, that was part of the fascination with the story, was what is this object? Where did it come from? How does it just incredibly manage to move from one person to the other? And I'll talk more about that when I cover the actual story itself. It's difficult not to wonder how deeply McDowell's view of families were influenced by growing up gay in the rural South of the 1950s and 1960s. Outside of the extensive Faces of Fear interview and a Wikipedia entry, little biographical information is readily available. But we know that McDowell was a member of the National Gay Task Force, spent 30 years with his partner, Lawrence Sinalik, and was one of the first modern horror authors to write about gay characters who didn't live tragically or die horribly, or at least were no likelier to do so than any other heterosexual counterparts. The introduction finishes with, sadly, McDowell's books have been out of print since well before his death in 1999. Today he's probably best known for writing the screenplay of the movie Beetlejuice, a worthy achievement but not a patch of his prose work. The volume you now hold in your hands is an attempt to change that. If you enjoy it, then it's well worth your time to seek out his other work, particularly Blackwater, a wonderfully Southern Gothic family saga in which some family members periodically transform into rapacious, Lovecraftian fish frog creatures, and the elementals, surely one of the most terrifying novels ever written. If I like an author, he said, I want him to have 40 books so that I can read every one of them, and that's how I see myself, as someone who writes constantly and who writes lots and lots, so that people who like me can have lots and lots to read. It seems to me that's a simple pleasure and one I like to fulfill. The simple pleasure of things starting out terrible and getting much, much worse. And of course, this is why for me, authors are my heroes, because without them, I wouldn't have all these books and I wouldn't be able to learn about so many different topics, travel to so many different countries and time periods and worlds that are made up. Now, some of the other works that Michael McDowell is known for that wasn't mentioned in the introduction but is mentioned in the write-up in the front of the book. As Poppy had already mentioned, he had written the screenplay for Beetlejuice in 1988, The Nightmare Before Christmas in 1993, and if you've seen some of my videos from my living room recording section, you've seen that I have a Nightmare Before Christmas trivia game, as well as other Jack paraphernalia. It's definitely one of my top movies. He also, as I didn't know, wrote the script for Thinner, which is a Stephen King. Actually, I think that's one of his Bachman books. And that was done in 1996. I've read the story and seen the movie, both well done. Michael McDowell also wrote episodes for Tales from the Dark Side, Amazing Stories, Tales from the Crypt, and Alfred Hitchcock Presents. So he certainly was well grounded within the horror genre, both as a novelist and a screenwriter. He most definitely attained his goal by the magic of believing and following through. Another fact that I didn't know is that Tabitha King, wife of author Stephen King, completed an unfinished McDowell novel, Candles Burning, which was published in 2006. So it's wonderful that that work was able to be finished by someone who admired him. I hope you enjoyed this video about Michael McDowell. Let me know in the comments down below. Have you read any of his works, and did you know everything that I just mentioned about him? I'm very glad that his work is back in publication, and I'm definitely looking forward to reading The Elementals, especially after that comment about it being one of the more terrifying novels out there. If you enjoy content of a bookish nature, nature videos, or silly cats, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you know when I upload content that may be of interest to you. And until next time, take good care.